Welcome to the For My Dawgs Podcast. This is the very first episode. Got my dog Johnny here with me. This is a podcast that exists for the purpose of talking about what it's like to be a man in today's world, and also talking about just how we need each other as men, to be honest about what we're going through, what we're struggling with, and to just talk about life. And so that's why we started this podcast. And that's why it's called For My Dawgs. It's also called that because I'm obviously a huge Tennessee Vols fan. Johnny's a huge Georgia Bulldogs fan. They both have dogs as their mascot, so we thought it was a perfect fit, perfect name for this podcast. Both got our coffee cups with our teams. I need to get a national championship baseball win since you got that, but
Back to back, man.
well, maybe we're coming for back-to-back baseball championships.
Hey, I did hear, I did research on this that Georgia actually is pretty good at men and women's tennis. So it's not just football. Thank you very much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
here we go.
So I guess I can't use that at all in this podcast, but
No, you can't.
yeah, I'm getting excited for football season. How about you?
Oh, oh, it's coming up. Did you watch Pat McAfee yesterday when he was
Uh,
talking to Peyton Manning about the SEC for this year?
I don't think so.
Okay, well, he was talking about it. It was getting me hyped, but he also had, even though I'm a Georgia fan, he had a really cool smoky shirt on. And I
Oh,
know you said you
really?
haven't found a cool one, but it was like a Nike
Yeah.
white. And I kind of
Uh-huh.
want to see if they find one for like Georgia, but it was, as a Georgia fan, it was actually kind of cool.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll have to see if I can get one. But no, I did not. I'll need to go watch that for sure. I didn't have time to watch the Pat McAfee show yesterday, unfortunately.
I have it on in the background for like everything I do now.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
white noise to me.
Yeah, for sure. That's how I do it too. It's good background noise while I'm working.
No, for sure. But I had it because our AC went out
Right.
and it was an awful day. So I had some enjoyment yesterday.
Yeah. Dude, you were telling me about that and that sounded absolutely miserable.
It didn't come on to 68 until 9 o'clock last night. And that was like a good temperature for me.
Yeah.
But from like 1 a.m. the day before to now, or right till yesterday, it was like 78 degrees. It was awful.
Oh my gosh.
So fun times. So Pat McAfee saved us.
Yeah. That's great. Well, since we're new to this whole podcasting thing, how about you just go ahead and introduce yourself and then I'll do the same after.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah, just give us a little background on who you are and what's going on with you.
Yeah. So my name is Johnny Gardner. I am a history teacher in the Charlotte area. I've only been teaching for a few months, haven't taught for a full year yet. So I'm excited for this upcoming school year to teach for a full year. I have a crazy dog named Lucy. She's an Irish setter and a poodle mix. She's an Irish doodle. So right now I have the summer off because I'm a teacher. So spending all my time with her. I'm also married to my beautiful wife, Claire. She is a occupational therapist. That's not a physical therapist. And I can do a whole podcast explaining the difference. We're not going to do that though. But we both work with kids. We love it. And we both moved to the Charlotte area. She's from here, so we moved back to Charlotte for her back in January, and we love the area a lot. But like I said, I got summers off, so just cruising right now. Kids don't come back until a month, really. So I still have I still have another month of summer left, just doing the final bit of my lesson planning. But I'm originally from Georgia. I'm 20 minutes south of Atlanta. I never went to the College of Georgia, just from there, and then got pride in the state. From Noonan, Georgia, also pride of home of Alan Jackson. So proud of that as well.
There you go.
But I moved up here back in, I guess you could say, 2017. I was kind of back and forth. So I've been in the North Carolina area for a while. I went to a small college in North Carolina, but I've been here since 2017, really just back and forth, and I'm here to stay, man. I love Georgia. Georgia will always be home, but North Carolina's pretty cool too.
I'm pretty biased, but I think North Carolina is the best state. in the great United States.
Not with football, but just with
Right, right.
everything
Just
else.
yeah, just location wise, weather wise,
Yeah,
got the beach close, the mountains close.
it's got everything.
Yeah,
And Georgia has beaches, but no one brags about their beaches. Because
yeah.
Georgia has beaches and mountains, but their mountains are pretty cool, but their beaches are nothing to brag about. So North
Yeah.
Carolina has the better of the two.
Well, people like what is it, Tybee Island?
I've heard, yeah,
I've
yeah,
heard people like that one, so
for
maybe
sure.
they're worth talking about.
Not for me.
There
That's why I moved.
you go. Well, I'm glad you moved. So now we live close to each other, which is
Oh,
great.
for
We
sure.
didn't used to.
For sure.
Um, well, yeah, thank you for sharing. My name's Tucker Furr. I am a pastor at a church in Huntersville, which really thankful to be in the role that I'm in and getting to serve people in that way. I was born and raised here in North Carolina. I was actually born in a small town called Mount Pleasant. So if that jersey back there is from playing football in high school, and then I got the helmet back there too. But it was a really great place to grow up. And since you threw out a pride of your hometown, I'll throw out that the Avett brothers are from Mount Pleasant. So that's a fun
You got
fact
the
if you
poster in
know.
the background.
I do hit, yeah, Avett Brothers poster up there. I've actually met one of them because he goes to my parents' church, so that's pretty cool. Um, but anyways, grew up there, and then went to Liberty for college up in Virginia. Got my undergrad there, and then um, went to the same school that Johnny did for grad school. Got my MDiv there, and in the middle of all that, worked at a summer camp where I not only met Johnny the first summer we worked there in 2017, which is the best summer, but we worked the same rec. We were on the climbing tower together, and just really hit it off. And didn't take long for us to become friends and hung out a lot that summer. Both of us came back to work the next summer, and these two girls named Haley and Claire, who were best friends, came to work that second summer, and the four of us started hanging out. And now Johnny's married to Claire, and I'm married to Haley, which is pretty sweet. So we just have like built-in couple friends since we were all friends before we even started dating each other, which is fantastic.
Yeah, the
Um,
hangouts have continued for years since then.
Yeah, yeah, and it's been awesome. We've gone on trips together. It's been great. So yeah, I've been married to Haley for it'll be 3 years this November. She's great. She's in marketing, um, and she's pretty much like a project manager running their campaigns, and she gets to work from home, which is super nice, and she loves that, and goes into the office, a couple times a month maybe. Um, so yeah, I don't know what else to share. Oh, my Tennessee fandom comes from I did not go to Tennessee, obviously, but I have family that live right outside of Knoxville. My mom's side of the family lived there, and so I just grew up visiting all the time. And once I went to a football game in that stadium right there, I was hooked because there's nothing like a game at Neyland, especially if it's at night.
Well, maybe.
Yeah. The EA college football game, someone had it out for Tennessee. The fact that we're not a top five toughest place to play just makes absolutely no sense to me.
Who were the top five?
I think number one was A&M. Number two was Alabama. Number three was who was number three? May have been you guys.
A&M's number one. I mean, like their stadium might be
Yeah.
cool, and then you play them and you realize it's going to be an easy game.
Yeah, that's what I don't understand about it. Like I I think they have the biggest stadium in college football now. I could be wrong. It may still be Penn State.
I
Or
thought it
no,
was
no, no.
Michigan.
Maybe it is Michigan. Here, I'll look it up real quick.
I think Michigan has like one of the biggest stadiums.
Yeah, let's see. Biggest college football stadiums. Yeah, Michigan's still number one, Penn State's two. But Kyle Field, they did this huge expansion, so I think they moved up a little bit. But
Man,
anyways,
we're going to get
Neyland's
off
up
task so
there.
many times in this
Oh yeah,
podcast.
Neyland's up there, so we should have been in the top five. But whatever, it is what it is. Yeah, A&M's number four.
I would disagree hard with that one.
Well, that's just size wise. They're number four.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like intimidation factor.
Yeah, no. Um, so yeah, that's a little bit about me. Um, and yeah, super thankful that we're finally doing this podcast. We had individually talked about doing our own podcast because I wanted to do a sports one, you wanted to do a history one, and then we just never did that. And one day we were like, why don't we just do a podcast together? It'd probably be a lot better than us talking on our own.
Yeah, because I love podcasts. I'm a podcast
Hmm.
junkie, and I find I listen to more podcasts with people talking to each other than just one guy talking.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I'm the same way. Unless I'm listening to like a sermon or something, but that's different.
Yeah, way to throw the church card.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is my job, so.
Sure. Sorry.
Um, well, yeah. So for the first episode, kind of what we wanted to do in the spirit of what we created this podcast for is uh, both of us have been through just some recent life experiences that we've learned a lot from as it pertains to how to be a man in today's world, but also learning the need for having people in your life who you can be honest with and talk about like all aspects of your life with. And for men, that's very rare. So we're just going to both share about our life experience here recently, and yeah, just share some lessons and some things we learned about life on the way. Um, and I'm gonna let Johnny kick it off and go first because he's got a really cool story to share just with him getting started teaching.
Yeah, I know we're talking about what we've been learning the past few months, but I told Tucker I need to go further than that. And so I
Mm,
need to do a short background. And by short background, I mean a long background. So when I graduated high school, I had no purpose of what I wanted to do because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I think I was so focused of high school, I didn't focus on anything beyond that. And when that time came, I only went to college because everybody was going to college, and I didn't want to be the one guy who didn't go to college. So I went to college with no purpose, no drive, and my grades showed. In fact, I failed my math class, and that gave me enough reason to stop college. I didn't want to waste money, so I took a gap year in college, and like everyone does in the gap year, I went to South Dakota and I lived
of
on an Indian
course.
reservation. Yeah, which is what everybody does when they do a gap year. I didn't go work a summer job. I moved across the country. And in high school, you learn a lot about Native Americans and you think you know about them today, but what you've learned and what you know today are different than what actually happened or has happening right now. So that got my mind going to history and I got me interested more in history and what the truth is of history. But so my time ended there and I moved back to North Carolina and I work at a summer camp and Tucker and I continue to hang out. And I don't know if stressed is the right word, but I definitely was anxious because my gap year is closing and I did not figure out what I wanted to do. So Tucker and I are talking and Tucker tells me, "Hey man, you want to be in ministry, you love working with students and you love history. Why don't you become a history teacher?" And as obvious as those three things together sound, that never clicked with me. And so I continued my history career with that, thanks to talking to Tucker. And I went to a small college in North Carolina, and I continued doing social studies because the college was so small that there wasn't a way to get a teaching license. So I just got my social studies degree. At this point, Claire and I get married. We moved to Greenville, North Carolina, where she goes to grad school to pursue her career for occupational therapy. And since I don't have a teaching license and we're only going to be there for a few years, I get a job that's not my teaching career. And I like it. It's kind of fun. It's not what I want to do with my life. I'm making decent money because, we're a single income because Claire is in school. And I think, all right, is this the American dream? Are you just supposed to just, not do what you want to do, but just pay for pay and provide for your family, and then, that's what I thought. So I was wrestling with that in Greenville. When she graduates, we have to move. We move to the Charlotte area, and because I have to find a new job because we're moving, I'm, praying to the Lord in the context. We're moving in December. I'm
Mhm.
not thinking anyone's going to hire in January. And I say, like, Lord, if this is really what you call me to do, you'll make it clear. But in the back of my head, I'm thinking, no teacher is going to quit, halfway through. Like, I mean, hopefully they would all stick it out. But thankfully, a teacher did quit. And as sad as that was, that teacher quit. That was a door that the Lord was opening, telling me, hey, no, like I made this possible for you, and this is what I want you to do. The funny thing about teaching is you don't have to have a teaching license. So I started and I had my bachelor's degree, which is required, obviously, but I didn't have my teaching license, and I'm actually getting my teaching license this fall.
Mhm.
But the only thing I knew about like teaching students was student ministry at a summer camp that Tucker and I worked at. And so I was thankful that this principal was trusting to me. I also had a great team that pulled me under their wing. And my mom, I was able to lean on her because she's a teacher. So I had a lot of support, but still really didn't know what I was doing teaching wise. But man, that first month I was there, I mean, and then since then I saw why there is such an excess of teaching. I saw why teachers are not valued. I saw how kids can be rude and mean. I mean, you hear about it, but like it's the truth. And I'm not even talking just to each other. I'm talking being rude to the teachers as well. And that whole thing reminded me of my dad's favorite movie, which is Van Helsing. And Van Helsing, Igor says, he says, do harm to others before they can do harm to you. And
Mhm.
as funny as I thought that quote was growing up, I realized teaching that is the middle school motto
Mhm.
is let's do harm to others before they can do harm to you. Let me make fun of you before you can make fun of me. Let me pick on you before you can pick on me. And I realized that when there was this kid acting out in class, and as he was acting out, I saw him. I mean, he was being mean to other kids. He was out of his seat. He was being disrespectful to me. So I set him out in the hallway, and he probably knows this routine. He's probably done this to other teachers before, and he's ready for me to yell at him in the hallway. So I go and meet him out in the hallway, and the first thing I say to him is, "Hey, man, how's your day going?" And he was just silent. He looked confused by that question because, again, he is prepared for me to yell at him. And he goes, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, I don't know. Like, how is your day going?" And then this little kid just breaks down crying. And he tells
Mhm.
me his day's going bad, like XYZ. And it is at that point that I realized that, okay, what we're seeing here in the classrooms are spider webs. Yes, we need to get on to these kids, and we can't have them being rude and mean to other kids, but you have to realize that more times than not, the reason why they're acting out is because of something going on. And what you're seeing are the spider web. So if you just keep getting onto them, they're going to keep retaliating. You got to get to the spider that's making those cobwebs, and you got to figure out the real reason. I found out that that kid was acting out that day because he was having a bad day at home.
Mhm.
And what I told him, and I said, "Hey, man, like, you can I'm not going to allow you to be rude to other kids. I'm not going to allow you to run around. But if you are having a bad day, you just come and like you write a note on a sticky note. You tell me, hey, Mr. Gardner, I'm having a bad day and I can work with you. But if you don't tell me that, I can't help you." And that's what I learned that. So my teaching philosophy through all this is I'm not just going to dump, I'm not just going to dump like knowledge and information on the kids like 24/7, because that's what Google's for. Yes, I need to be I need to be a strict teacher. I need to, obviously teach history, but man, you got the little guy behind you, Ted Lasso. He is
Oh
my
yeah,
teaching inspiration. Because
yeah,
oh yeah, there he is, Ted
man,
Lasso. You got,
believe.
and you have the mustache.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I have the belief poster in my classroom because
I got
Ted
one above
Lasso.
my office door.
Dude, there you go. Because Ted Lasso, yes, he was coaching those guys about soccer or football,
Hmm.
but he was also making them better men and women for society, and that's what I'm doing too. Yes, for if a parent hears this or my principal hears this, and he's like, "Are you not teaching the kids about history?" No, obviously I'm teaching the kids about history, but while I'm there, I'm also going to make them better men and women for society.
Right.
And I think that's what we hope to do with this podcast, and that's what I've learned through that is that okay, there are spider webs that we are seeing with men in particular, and maybe that's the reason why they're acting out, and we got to get to that spider in order to help them and make them better men and women, or in our case for this podcast, better men for society.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, you got to get to the root of it. You can't just pull up the weeds. And if you
For
pull up
sure.
a weed and you don't get the root, the weed's just going to come back. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, you got to get at the root of it. And I like the cobwebs versus the spider analogy. I think that's a good one. But man, like that story you shared about, pulling that kid out in the hallway and like all you did was simply ask him how his day's going,
Hmm.
and that unlocked something in him.
Hmm.
And he felt like he could share with you in that moment, what he's going through.
Yeah.
I just think that's so powerful. And I think
Yeah.
so many young men and men like us and even older men, just men across the board don't feel like they can share those things. They feel like
And
they got to
yeah, and
have
I think
this. Go ahead.
well, I would say, and I think that no one is taking the time to ask them for
Right.
that. Because I think that, like you're saying, is yeah, no one, guys don't share this because I think it's sometimes it's too manly to share things, and that's what I hope this podcast breaks down. Is that I
Yeah.
mean, man, we need to share things with people, but sometimes guys aren't going to share unless they're given the chance, and I don't think this kid was ever given a chance to before.
Yeah, and that's, I think it's two sides of the coin, right? You got men that feel like they have to put on this tough exterior and act
Hmm.
like they have everything together. And
Hmm.
so they don't want to talk about anything, even if they are asked, because
Hmm.
they feel like they're protecting some sort of self-image. Um, and it could be a good motive, like maybe they think they got to be strong for their kids or for, their spouse or, something like that. And so they feel like they just have to deal with all their stuff and figure it out on their own, and so they don't talk about it. But then on the other side, you also have just as men, we do a bad job of checking in on each other or
Hmm.
like just thinking about the fact that our friends and people we care about in our lives probably do have stuff that they're dealing with and probably do have stuff that's really challenging that they're working through. And we just forget to ask,
No,
or
for
we don't
sure.
make it a priority to ask. So it's really sad. And, you and I both read a book recently, and it's no surprise that it's called What Would Ted Lasso Do?
I love the
Um,
title.
yeah, it was a great short read.
Hmm.
Just kind of like taking stuff from the show, like the life lessons from the show, and, making it practical in today's world. And one of the chapters was on vulnerability. Because in the show, Ted has his own struggle with that. He's dealing with like panic attacks, and in one episode, it gets so bad that he just like walks off in the middle of the game. And obviously everybody's confronting him, like the press, even the team, the other coaches. They're like, "Dude, what's going on? Like, what happened?" And he says he just had food poisoning. So at first he's not willing to talk about like what's actually going on, and then at the end of that episode, he ends up opening up to the coaches, and it sparks this like honesty, just domino effect. Like everybody, all the other coaches start sharing stuff that you know that they've never told anyone before, and it's a funny scene. But so in the chapter, the author's talking about vulnerability, and she shared this statistic that just like absolutely broke my heart. And I'm sure it did the same for you.
Mhm.
Um, but she said reported depression rates are much higher among women, but the reported suicide rates are significantly higher among men. And what that means is that women, when they feel like something's off, when they feel like something's wrong, they're willing to go talk to somebody about it. They're willing to seek help. And that's why their depression rates are higher because it's being reported. They're going to see like a therapist or a counselor.
But they're talking about it.
They're talking about it.
Right.
Men, on the other hand, feel like they can't do that or that, going to see somebody would be a sign of weakness or whatever the thought may be. And so their solution is to just stuff it down, try and figure it out on their own. And then when they get to a place where they feel like there's no way out of this and they feel like their only solution to end whatever their struggle is or whatever they're going through is to end their life. I mean, that is like so heartbreaking.
It shows that guys need help, but they're not willing to
Yeah,
talk about it.
right. Yes. And I hope through, not only our stories, but hopefully through our friendship too and other friendships we have, like, and through this podcast, we hope to show that it's okay to talk about what you're going through. And if you're
Yeah.
struggling, don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be so prideful that you think you can handle all this on your own. Like we're meant to have other people in our lives to pick us up when we're down and vice versa.
Yeah. And I think,
Um,
and in the book, it also talks about, and I feel like we're going to be quoting the book a lot, and we're not paid from the book to sponsor it. We just love the book. Also need to give you the book back. But it talks about when the last Summer Olympics, when the gymnast Simone
mm,
like walked off, or not walked off, but she like canceled because she was struggling with some mental health stuff. She
hmm.
got backlash too.
Yep.
Um, yeah, she's a female, and we're talking about guys, but it was like guys that were getting on to her saying, "Hey, man, that's just sports. You just gotta like stuff your
Hmm.
feelings," and that's what I feel like is the issue is that our parents' generation, and they're the ones who taught us to if you're going through some crap, just stuff your feelings,
Hmm.
and then you have the world who's trying to be all accepting like at it, but then sometimes when you give an idea that's different, then you're wrong or you're weak for it. And so we're in no way saying that we don't want you to be a strong man. We want you to still be a strong
Right.
godly man. We want you to still be a strong physical man, but you
Hmm.
also need to and a strong like emotional man too.
Hmm.
Because if you're this macho of a man, but you're going through some crap and you're too quote unquote tough to share it, then you're not that tough, man.
Yeah.
And that's what we hope this podcast does through our stories. And Tucker's going to share his story in a second,
Hmm.
is that you realize that it is okay to do it and you're still a strong man. We're not taking that away from you. And in fact, you're even stronger for doing that.
Hmm. Well, in the um, so I preached a sermon this past Sunday, and it was on a passage in Acts about this couple named Ananias and Sapphira, and they in the passage they sell a piece of property, and they see this other guy who did the same thing. He brings all of the proceeds from his sale, puts it at the apostles' feet, and he gets honored for it. And so they see that and they say, I want to be honored like that.
Mhm.
So they come up with this plan where they're only going to bring part of what they actually sold the property for, but they're going to say that it was everything. They're going to say they're giving everything just like the other guy did, when in reality, they're only giving a piece. And just as I was wrestling through that passage, working through that passage, the thing that rose to the top is like they were trying to portray themselves as somebody that they weren't in reality. They were trying to create their own self-image to receive honor from people in their community. And the story does not end well for them, to say the least. Um, and I was just thinking through that, and I'm like, how often do we do that as men? How often do we try to portray some version of ourselves that isn't actually who we really are? Or like we act like we have everything okay. We have these tough walls that go up, but on the inside, we're wrestling with a lot. Maybe we're battling depression. Maybe we're battling anxiety. Maybe we're battling, addiction, and we're not
Mhm.
talking about it. And I think it's no mistake that most 12-step programs, the first step is honesty.
Mhm.
And as I was working through that passage, there's a verse in James where he says, confess your sins to one another so that you may be healed.
Mhm.
And it's like, I think not just in confessing ways you're failing or ways you're falling short, but like also just being honest is actually how you experience healing. And it takes like courage and bravery to talk about how you're failing or how you're struggling. But that's where you find the healing. That's where you begin. I'll just go ahead and get into my story because a lot of that comes through in just
Come
kind of
on.
what I've been through in the past couple of years. Um, so yeah, like I said, I'm a pastor and went to school for that, got my master's degree to be in ministry. And so I started once I graduated undergrad, took a student pastor position at the church I'm at now. And I was right out of college and I was finishing up my graduate degree. And in that role, there were a lot of things I loved about it because I'm a super extroverted, relational guy. Ministry is very relational. I love teaching the Bible and helping people understand who Jesus is and his love for them and what it looks like to follow him. I loved all of that, but there were these other parts of the job that um, just I didn't feel like was my gifting or like how the Lord wired me, and it was a good bulk of the job, and so it created in me this weird like, well, at the same time, let me go back a little bit. At the same time, our church was going through a pretty difficult season. I got hired in 2020, which was like smack dab in the middle of the
Forgot
pandemic.
about that.
Yeah, and so that, that wasn't easy for anybody, but our church, suffered during that time, as did a lot of churches. So I know we're not alone in that. But paired with the pandemic, we had, the pastor that had been there for 24 years retired the March after I got hired. There were a few other staff transitions that happened. So the staff went from a pretty large staff to a much smaller staff. The pandemic was happening, so our numbers dropped. So like we didn't have as many volunteers, and the ones that were faithful and serving, which we had so many, were doing so many things that like I didn't feel like I could ask people to do more to help me. So Haley and myself, we just like took on everything that needed to get done. Um, and so those two things created in me a struggle with my sense of purpose and like, God, what have you created me for? Like, what am I on the earth for? Because I thought it was this, but this doesn't feel right. So, like, what is it, God? And then at the same time, I was starting to feel just overwhelmed, burnt out, stressed out because Haley and I were just taking on everything just because of the position we were as a church. And I wasn't willing to ask for help because as a people pleaser, I didn't want to put more on people who were already doing so much. And so, in the middle of those two things of wrestling with sense of purpose and feeling burnout and overwhelmed, created something that I've never experienced before, which now looking back, I would describe it as a form of depression. And tasks that before were easy, or not easy, but tasks before that like weren't so challenging, all of a sudden became very challenging. Like the stuff that I would consider like a weakness that wasn't like a strength of mine. I used to be able to do it and it not feel like that much of a burden, but like when I started struggling with depression, it began to feel like those tasks were like climbing up a mountain with a boulder on my back. Like they were just weighing me down. And I was losing like my sense of joy that I had in ministry, that like even the parts that I loved before, like I was losing the sense of joy in that. And for a long time, I didn't talk to anybody about it. And I did the typical thing that men do of, I just need to figure this out. Like, I'll eventually come to a place where, like, I can get it together, I can get over it, I can push through, I can persevere. And so I didn't talk to anybody about it. And then the Lord finally brought me to a place where he broke me down. And Haley and I were going to the beach to go on vacation with my family. And I remember getting in the car. It's about a 3.5 hour drive. And I talked to Haley about what I was going through from the moment we got in the car till we arrived at the beach house. And I told her everything. I was like, here's where I'm at. Here's what I'm wrestling through. Here's what I'm struggling with, and at the time, I didn't even have the words to say, like, I'm dealing with, depression. That came later for me because it was something I never experienced. I didn't know how to, like, identify it and talk about it yet. But I just told her, kind of I'm wrestling with my sense of purpose and feeling overwhelmed and burnt out. And she shared that she was experiencing some of that overwhelm and burnout too, because she was helping me a ton. And we didn't, we were just doing too much. And so I shared it with her first, and that, like, it just felt like a huge weight off my shoulders and just began to feel like I could breathe. And so shortly after that, I started talking to you about it, and we had conversations because, we go on family beach trips together. And I think that first Hilton Head trip together,
Mhm.
maybe it was the second, was when I started talking to you about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
it was the first one, I think. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I
And
remember that.
so that was also felt very freeing. Like
Hmm.
knowing that you knew what I was going through, and like being able to hear you share your perspective on it, and like what you see in me and what you think my gifts are and what my strengths are. And, Haley, same way, like getting to hear her perspective on it was really helpful. And then after that, I talked to a few mentors in my life, who just really helped give me space, and were so gracious. I actually talked to my boss, who's at the time, who's a mentor of mine, about all of this, which you would think that's crazy, but he was so gracious and just gave me the time to think through things, to wrestle with it, to pray, to seek the Lord. And he just supported me. And he was like, look, man, we're here for you. We want what's best for you, and obviously what's best for the church too. So like you need to do what you need to do, to figure out what the Lord's doing here. And I eventually came to a place where I decided that the Lord was leading me to step down from the student pastor role. Um, and I think, hindsight, I think it's because there was just some stuff he needed to work on in me. There were some lessons I needed to learn, some perspective I needed to gain. And so I stepped down from the student pastor role, had a connection at a commercial flooring company. So I took a sales role there. And that is not at all what I thought I would do at any point in my life. I never thought I would work in the construction industry. So going into it, it was sales. So I knew it was a relational, which I was like, I can do that. I can build relationships. And in that, man, I just learned so much in that time at that company and in that role. Um, it gave me the space and the freedom to not feel like, because I think in the student pastor role, I felt like there was a lot of things I couldn't talk about with people because I'm a pastor, and I have to I felt like I kind of had to have it all together. Like I couldn't air my dirty laundry out because people look up to me and people expect certain things out of a pastor. And so going into the sales role, it actually gave me this like freedom to just like be who I am and be okay with that and not
That's
care
wild.
what people think and not, not worry about what expectations people have of me, but to just be authentically who I am. And that's
Yeah.
big. Like that means a lot to me. I've always tried to live my life that way.
Hmm.
Um, and so getting back to that was healing for me as well. And yeah, in that role, I the Lord showed me just so many areas of like weakness that I had that I needed to work on and improve in, and started to work on some of those things. And he led me to this 12-week program that was like a coaching program that I went through, and it was all about like building mental toughness and resilience, and just so much of that the Lord used to help me get out of that depression and to give me tools to not go back to that place. And I'm sure we'll talk more about some of the stuff I've learned through that course, later in the podcast. But that was super healing for me, and just continued to have, people that I was talking to about everything, and, didn't hold anything back from. And I think our friendship grew a lot, in that
Oh, for
time,
sure.
because both of us, just had a lot going on, and we talked, pretty consistently. Um, and yeah, but during that time, I knew early on in that sales role, like this is not, this still isn't what I'm meant to be doing. Like this is not what God's created me for. This is not why I'm on the earth.
Hmm.
And so, I began to wrestle through that. Like, okay, God, you led me into the sales role. This doesn't feel like this is it. So what is it? And, I looked at it into a few different things, and just nothing really felt right. And then my church created this new position. Um, and it was a position that was all about outreach in the community, building relationships in the community, um, leading the connections team that helps guests get connected to our church, leading the missions team. And when I heard about this role, just something in me was like, that's it. Like that's what I've been waiting on. That's what I've been hoping for. And so, I didn't know whether or not I'd have a good shot at getting that role again, but just because I had stepped down from the previous position, and it had only been a year and a half since I did that. But the Lord was just super faithful and made a way, went through the interview process, and it was, pretty lengthy, and ended up getting that job. And I'm like, it's crazy how much I grew in a year and a half just by being honest about where I was, and then taking active steps to like get better and to
Hmm.
heal and to, get out of that place with the help of other people. I didn't do it on my own. Um, and just learned so many lessons like about in my time away. I gained so much perspective being on the other side of things. Like in ministry, that was all I knew, but like getting to work a normal 9 to 5 corporate job that most of the people that I minister to at the church are doing on a week to week basis was a huge like perspective shift for me that I needed.
So you can like relate to them.
Right. And I worked, I mean, it was construction. So you know how construction is because
Oh
your
yeah.
dad's worked in it for forever.
Yeah.
Um, it's not the most like Christ-like place, I guess is the way to say it. Like, they're cussing all the time, and, just talking about vulgar things. And it wasn't all the time, but like you hear a lot of that stuff. And so it was good for me to like be in a place that was like that, and still trying to be authentically following Jesus in the midst of that. And, loving those people well, not judging, not
Right.
not looking down on them, but just accepting them for who they were and trying to be an example of the love of Jesus to them.
Right.
And so it was good for me to be in that scenario. But yeah, I think, the biggest lesson I've learned through all of that is that you know, we started this podcast because men don't talk about what they're going through and they don't talk about the challenging stuff they got going on.
Mhm.
And through that experience, what I've come to realize is that suffering, if you want to use that word, or going through really difficult things, going through challenges, experiencing some great failure or setback, all of that is, I've come to see it as a necessary companion in life, not something to be avoided. And that perspective shift, I think, unlocks the ability to be honest about it and
Mhm.
to talk about it because so many people ask the question like, why do bad things happen to good people, or like,
We're
why
all
do
bad
why
people.
do good people suffer?
Yeah.
And the way I've come to think about it now is like that suffering or like something bad happening in your life doesn't make you worse off. It actually makes you better.
Hmm.
Like those things are put into your life to make you into who you were created to be,
Hmm.
to help you get to that next step, to help you grow as a human being. And I think um another Ted Lasso quote that I love is in the first episode, he's an American football coach, takes a job as an English Premier League soccer club coach, and he knows nothing about the game of soccer. He takes his assistant coach from Kansas. They move to London, and he's away from his family. And in the first episode, they're talking like, "Are we just crazy for doing this thing?"
Hmm.
And they go back and forth a little bit. And Ted says to Coach Beard, he says, taking on a challenge is a lot like riding a horse. If you're comfortable while you're doing it, you're probably doing it wrong. And I think the same could be said about life. The same could be said about following Jesus. The same could be said about marriage. The same could be said about friendship. I just think it applies across the board. Like if we're comfortable while we're doing something, we're probably doing it wrong. And then another quote I love is Matthew McConaughey was asked one time, like, if he could go back and change anything about his life, what would he change? And he said, I would go back and fail more.
Dang.
And he said, you learn more through failure than in the heights of your success.
Mm.
Um, and I just think there's something to that. And I think that's freeing. It's like, okay, we can talk about these things because they're actively making us better humans. They're helping us make our world a better place by going through it and by dealing with it. So I know that was I went
No, it
long
was
on that
good.
story, but there was a lot packed into a short amount of time in my life. Um, and yeah, it's just cool to reflect on the Lord's goodness and faithfulness through all that.
Well, I want to highlight a few things you said.
Yeah, yeah, go for it.
One, I was looking up the verse 'cause like you were saying how you think suffering, you know, helps you, and in fact, in John, Jesus says, "I've told you these things that you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world.
Hmm.
Not if you have suffering, you will have suffering in this world, but be courageous, be strong." Because I've conquered the world. So this
Hmm.
podcast is not for, if you do it, it's, hey, dude, you're going to suffer.
Hmm.
And we're here to help you along that road because I think a cool thing is about both of our stories is that we were both at a point to where we didn't like our job
Hmm.
and we wanted to do a different job, but we didn't believe that was going to happen. Right? There's no way that the church is going to hire you back. There's no
Right.
way that I'm going to be a teacher halfway through the semester.
Yeah.
We didn't have like I think that we said we had faith in the Lord, but we didn't. And the Lord was like, I'm going to take care of you. And this because it's despite anything we've done, despite how faithful we were, like how faithful we were, it was because of who the Lord is. And it's
Hmm.
really cool to look back on those like similarities that we both said, I don't think that's going to happen, but it did.
Hmm.
And also one thing I want to highlight is you said while you were a youth pastor that you lost your joy and you lost your passion for that. Would you say that now you've found that
Oh yeah,
back in
a hundred
ministry?
percent,
Yeah.
100%. Like I am over the moon about being back on staff at the same church I was at, in this new position. Like every day I'm just so grateful.
Hmm.
And like I sit in this seat in my office. I'm like, this feels right. And
And
like,
I've watched that happen. It's really cool to watch that because when you would tell me this story about the timeline, and like you did come to me, talking about you dealing with depression, but when you just said the timeline out loud and I saw how long it was, I didn't realize the length between when you told me and when it actually happened.
yeah,
And I think there's several things that are bad about depression, but one of the worst things is the people who are struggling with depression don't show it.
hmm,
Like for like carbon monoxide. The reason why people have carbon monoxide detectors, and if you don't, you should get one, is because you won't see it and you won't smell it. It's called a
hmm,
silent killer because it will come into your house, fill up your house, and it will kill you. And that's why you have those monitors in your house, so because it will detect it for you, because it's called a silent killer. And that based off that stat that you showed about men, how women struggle with depression more and men have suicide more, is because depression is a silent killer. No one knows that people are going through it because most of the time, people going through depression are smiling.
yeah,
I had no idea you were struggling with that during the time.
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, anytime I was in social settings, I was the same guy I always was. I could
Right.
turn it on and be, social butterfly, talking to everybody, having a good time. But it was in those moments when I was by myself that I would struggle. I mean, there were nights that I lost sleep. Like I wouldn't sleep because of what I was going through.
Mm-hmm.
And um, yeah, like there were nights I shed tears. There were nights where I'd be like, Haley, I just can't, like, I can't hang out tonight. And I would just go sit outside without my phone and just sit there and think, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And you're exactly right. Like, there's probably way more people that we interact with on a daily basis that are
Oh,
dealing with
for
something
sure.
like that than we can even comprehend.
Yeah.
Um,
Because you probably do that thing where you go out on your porch and then the next day you and I would be hanging out and you're the life of the party. And I had no
yep.
idea. So like
Hmm.
to everyone listening here is like you may think, okay, I have no one that I know
Yeah.
that is struggling with that. So hopefully these stories, you're now thinking and maybe you reach out to people and because maybe they are smiling through it all,
Hmm.
but when they get home, they go outside and they just sit in silence. So
Yeah.
you have no idea. So like reach out to a brother for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, no one's immune to it. No one's
Mm-mm,
immune to it. I was
mm,
doing all the right things when this stuff happened. Like
right.
I was I had a discipline of, reading my Bible, spending time with Jesus in that way. I had a discipline of praying. I worked out pretty consistently. Like
Mm-hmm,
from the outside looking in, you would think all those things would mitigate some of that, but
mm-hmm,
I was still dealing with it either way.
mm,
And the Lord had to shake things up in my life to help me heal. And ultimately what it came down to is talking about it helped me the most. That
right.
helped me take the biggest steps forward
Right.
in healing was talking about it with people. And we hope that this podcast can create a space where people can be open, people can, connect and talk about what they're going through. Because the reality is, and this statistic I found studying for that sermon last week, that blew my mind. Only about 50% of Americans can claim that they have even one close friend that they can share everything about them with, that they can
Wow.
bare their soul to.
Wow.
Only half of Americans. So the reality is there's a lot of people that don't even have relationships in their life where they can share this stuff.
Mm,
And so we hope that this podcast can be a doorway into that type of community, into that type of relationship. And yeah, because we need more of that. We
for
need
sure.
more of a willingness to talk about it and more spaces to be able to talk about it.
For
So
sure.
we've gone, a good bit here, and so I don't want to take, too much more time. But yeah, I hope as listeners you enjoy just hearing kind of our stories and just some of the nuggets, that we learned throughout that and the lessons that we learned. And I hope you'll take those and apply them to your life. and we'll be, continuing this, and we'll talk about anything and everything. But at the end of the day, we're always going to bring it back to what it's like to be a man, in today's world, and how much we need each other as men. So that's the gist of it. And so with that, I just want to say, you go be a dog today.
And go be there for your dog.